All right, this is Moneyline with Nancy on Africa Independent Television. Welcome to our viewers. Of course, we've had over 18 minutes chopped from the time. From 11 a.m. we started. Let me just give you a breakdown of what we have for you today. Shortly, I will be starting the interview on the Budeshi documentation to promote efficiency in our public procurement. My guest is seated here at the table. After the interview with her, I will be talking about Q1 2021 foreign trade statistics that was just released by the National Bureau of Statistics. Wilson Eromobo, who is the senior economist at the NESG, that is the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, will be joining me to take a look at that. So let's get started. Just before they handed over to me, we were talking about what Budeshi documentation is about. I have my guest here. She is Ifeoma Onyebuchi. She's the program director at the PPDC, that is a Public and Private Development Center. Hello, Ifeoma, and thanks for joining me on the show.
Hello, Nancy.
How
Good
are
morning.
you? Good morning.
Nice to join you. It's really a great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Now, let's get started. What we're looking at today, Budeshi documentation. What does that mean? I don't speak Hausa, but I saw somewhere that is like our Hausa language. What does that mean? And what is it about?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Nancy. Budeshi is actually an Hausa word. And what it basically means is open it. Open it. Just make it open. And literally, it's all about opening the procurement process, like you rightly pointed out. And then the documentation, Budeshi documentation, is actually a journey, kind of. It's a journey of the Public and Private Development Center, the journey that took us into advocating everything around our activism on openness, transparency, accountability, and good governance, especially how we relate to public procurement in Nigeria, which I really love to talk about more. But the documentation is just that journey, that chronicle of how we involved ourselves in the procurement process in Nigeria, what it was like for us, the experiences, the cycle, all the things we saw. It's all documented in that report, and that's why we call it Budeshi documentation. Okay,
can you speak to me about some of your experiences? Because when we come to public procurement budgeting process, it's so difficult, and a lot of things around our budgeting system every year, same old. It seems as if it's a ritual. Our public procurement has challenges. So can you quickly just speak to me about some of your experiences, what you guys learned, and what you came up with, and what the report is all about?
Perfect. Thank you so much. So just speaking directly from a personal experience, because I've done this work for like 4 years now, and I'm sure a lot of civil society, we have a very viable civil society community in Nigeria that work around budget, procurement, and good governance, and of course, social justice. And I think what we've seen so far is, the movement from ad hoc budgeting process to, influencing government to become more transparent. Now, every time we hear that, I think it was a few years ago that World Bank published a report that points that Africa, loses about $50 million to procurement-related corruption. And that's a huge thing for us as Nigeria, being the most populous country in Africa, and of course in a black country in the whole world. So what we've seen is, the gaps, the pulse of the people, because when you talk about procurement in Nigeria, it's very huge, and that's where a huge percentage of our resources, our national cake or national revenue and resources goes into. And procurement also affects people's welfare, affects our social life. It has an impact, direct impact, because that's where the government builds hospitals, they build roads, virtually everything, and it takes a huge chunk of our budget. Now, having that process, you can imagine how big this is, and even by describing it, you already seen the potentials of corruption if it is not managed in a much efficient way, transparent way, in a way that the money is being expended leads to, improved service delivery, that government also has value for it. Because if you look at our public procurement law 2007, the core principle of that act is that public procurement, the Bureau that, of course, the act that established the Bureau talks about the principles of accountability, value for money, competition, level playing ground. So if all those things are not achieved in the process by which this procurement of goods and services are not done, then we are in a real, big trouble, because what that literally means is that you're accruing revenue, you're putting it in a place that has potential for people to, loot the money. Every time we talk about, illicit financial flows and, different kinds of gates, issues, they all relate to procurement. And it's very important that the processing that leads to the procurement of those goods is efficient, is done in a way.
BPP.
Yes, we do have a BPP, but the BPP is a regulatory body that coordinates procurement in Nigeria. But again, the process itself, the process of the procurement itself, which is the bane of the exchange of goods and services, working with the private sector, the contractors to procure that, is done at the MDA level. Now, the MDAs have their own independent procurement process, from planning to budgeting to award to contract, down to implementation, where these things are being done. And that's where I'm actually going to. So you have all these things being done at the MDA level. If there's no way that they can make, you can imagine the kind of data, the information, the contractual information that will be coming out from all these processes, from planning. Now we have about 700 federal MDAs, right? If there's no sort of system that uniforms and monitors how these people procure, from the planning, how they even disclose information for the public to see, how involved are the people who benefit from those goods, how involved are they in the process? And that's what the open contracting is all about. And that's what led PPDC to the Budeshi journey. I talked about Budeshi, Open It. Now, Budeshi is just a web-based tool. And what it does is it links budget and procurement cycles across the value chain. So all information from planning to tender to award to contract down to implementation will be linked under one system, so that the wider stakeholders, people could see what is going on, because it's already publicly available. It's using technology to aggregate this data in a way that is publicly available for people to identify red flags easily before things go wrong. And that's what open contracting does, and that's why we got involved in it in 2016. PPDC got involved in it because of the work we've done over the years, seeing how Nigeria moved from ad hoc budgeting process to having a freedom of information law, and seen how we have collected data, used this information to monitor procurement processes. And we said, look, we've gotten to a point where we need to move from manual way of record keeping to a more sophisticated way, in a way that is tech-enabled, in a way that people could see what goes on in that process, in a way that the public sector and the private sector can monitor actually what goes on in that place without you having to go through the route of requesting for information. So what you're saying now, an average citizen,
or for someone like me right now, I can go on the platform.
Absolutely.
And I can see what exactly is happening.
Absolutely. That's the bane of the crux of the matter.
Okay. From that 2016 till now, speak to me about your findings, because has it really improved? Have we seen, an enhancement of what is done? Because if you take a look at Nigeria, it has one of the most detailed budgets in Africa, line by line item. However, one can argue that you see repetitions of items. You can see, I want to construct 30-kilometer road in one certain place. Another agency is doing the same thing and has put the same money. So speak to me about your findings, or perhaps a lot of people like you, social activists or those in the civic space, has to do a lot more.
I think that's the beauty of open contracting. So you can imagine the example you just gave now. Prior to having an open contracting system, many of those things would have been swept under the carpet.
We wouldn't have known in the first place.
We wouldn't have known. We wouldn't have known. And it's not like those things just started today. They've been there for a long time, for decades. But because it's now tech-enabled, this use of technology people can monitor and see where the red flags, the inflation, the cost inflations, and the repetition and duplicity you talked about. And I think what we saw, this also very similar to what we saw, which I'm also sure that other civil societies also saw, for us to say, you know what, we have to move from a paper-based record keeping to a tech-based record keeping, so that we can actually see more people can get involved, citizens can get involved. And I think what we saw, so comparing what was there before and then what was now, is more like it's now easier for us to actually pinpoint which project that has red flags or that is suspicious, that you need to really, go deeper and find out what actually went through the procurement process. Unlike before, when we used to guess, so we don't know. And that's the typical issues we were having there. You could have a project, that's before we started the whole open contracting in Nigeria. You could have a project that has a different name during the budgeting process. Then when it comes to the award stage, the name has changed. Likewise, the amount. Then when it comes to award, the name has also changed. Down to when it's been implemented, they can recite the project, move it, reallocate it, or move it to another place. Now it's very difficult for you to actually say that this is the same project you're talking about. But because it's now been, Nigeria has adopted open contracting, you are not tracking the name of the project, but the code. Because open contracting, what it does, it uses unique identifiers, to across each project, each budget line item, each project will have a unique code, and which is what we call unique identifier, that follows the project from planning, from when it's been conceived at the department level, at the MDA level, down to the award, and then implementation. And this is what open contracting does. It helps us to monitor different projects. And that's actually what is, different from what it was then, and also what we are seeing now. The ability for us to identify this easily. And also the ability for civil servants, because it's not easy. It's a new thing, moving from a manual way of doing things to a more sophisticated way of doing things. It wasn't really easy when we started, but I think what this documentation did for us is it helped us to actually see the benefits, how Nigeria can actually grow economically if they manage their procurement.
Yeah, I was coming to that. What our economy stands to gain, even the political economic side of it, because you see that at the end of 4 years, everyone comes to say, oh, vote for me, vote for me. So what does our economy stand to gain, especially if we have an efficient public procurement system? Then I think I would add the last question, if there's any recommendation from you guys, that are in this space. So 2 questions in one, so shoot.
Thank you. So I think, first of all, it's all about managing your procurement. Now, not just only Nigeria, lots of African countries has moved from commodity exports, spending, tax-based, to taxation, right? And then it's all about accountability. As people pay their taxes, people want to know, how are you able to manage? How are you able to be accountable to the monies that you accrue from all these different revenues, because you and I pay taxes. So it's very important that government begins to look inwards, but also see, how they could improve in being transparent. And the best way to also do that is using technology. And the report, the whole documentation showed us that it's actually possible. Because I remember when we started the advocacy, there was so much fear of the unknown. People were a bit skeptical about it. They don't know what is the need for them.
Why were they skeptical? Is it that it will change their old way of doing things, or it will bring them out? It would say, okay, perhaps for those that are allegedly corrupt, or those that have taken advantage of of the old system,
exactly,
and not, like, oh, they are going to fish it out.
I think it's a combination of all the things you've said so far. So people have different, opinions about it. It's new. How do we move? But I think it's also from the place of, I am a public servant and I'm just used to writing data and managing all the things. And now you're bringing this huge computer for me. Where do I start from? And I don't know if I can do this because it's been done in America or elsewhere in the world. Doesn't mean that I'm ready to take up this kind of kind of huge task. And that's also where we became very relevant, because we didn't just help to do the advocacy and get this to be done in Nigeria, but also providing the technical expertise, walking through.
That's the skills for them.
Exactly. And today we have almost all the MDAs at the federal level doing this. And beyond the federal level, we have more than 10 state governments doing open contracting today. And this is just 4 years down the line. It's become a practice. It's become a best practice to the point that Nigeria is also, sharing the experiences with other people. But speaking specifically about the economic gain you talked about, I think it's all about efficient manage of resources. When you manage your resources efficiently, you have the potential of not overspending, or manage your resources in a way that you could be able to invest them in another thing. But some of the recommendations that I would like to talk about is, seeing many of these reform agendas in Nigeria, many of them are being funded by international organizations. And that's also why we did the documentation, to also serve as a guide to the public sector, to actually see how much they've actually saved through open contracting. By managing the procurement process more efficiently, you save more money, you detect fraud in the system, and in the process, you save more finances. So why don't we also start thinking in words, looking in words, and seeing how Nigerian government can actually start investing in procurement. And this also goes to, the tech infrastructure needed for that, the internet infrastructure, the skill, the equipment.
How far are we doing with that? The tech infrastructure, are we there yet?
I don't think we are there yet, because if you look at what we've done, PPDC has done at the state level, and which is also a very low-tech area. It's still very mundane. There's still a lot to be done there. But also seeing how the capacity, how the investment should be, put into the public sector. We have a budget appropriation each year. It could be something that could even fit into the MDA's budget for each fiscal year, making sure that the budget carries, expenses to cater for things around open contracting, because I think that's the only way it can be sustainable. We can't have this kind of huge something that is dependent, on our economic advancement being, funded, a huge component of it being funded by externals.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you very much, Ifeoma.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for shedding light on this.
All
right, I've been speaking with Ifeoma Onyebuchi, who is the Program Director at Public and Private Development Center. We've been looking at having an efficient, and effective, as well as a responsible public procurement process. Let's quickly take a break. When we return from the break, Wilson Eromobo, the senior economist at Nigeria Economic Summit Group, will be joining me virtually for us to take a look at the foreign trade statistics released from the National Bureau of Statistics. I'll be giving you more data when we return, and not just the data, the cocoa behind the data, the explanation behind the data. We'll be right back.